One Piece is the most politically conscious shonen to ever do it. Oda as a writer has the ability to wrap real-life political issues and ideas into a fun pirate adventure that doesn't seem at all forced or that it takes away from the ultimate feel of the story. In fact, I'd argue that his political undertone can very easily fly over the unattentive reader's head when just reading as a casual shonen fan, but can also be painfully obvious to anyone who's outright looking for it. I mean, what is the one thing everyone brings up in praise of One Piece? World building. The reason why is its intricate array of different islands and characters, each meticulously designed with its own unique governance and ideals. No two One Piece colonies or persons are quite the same, and everybody and everywhere offers different perspectives on various worldly issues. There is no better example of this than Sir Crocodile in the Alabasta Kingdom incident, easily one of the best standalone arcs in the series. We as readers initially experience Alabasta as a kingdom in distress. A kingdom plagued with violence, disorder, drought, and worst of all, a working class increasingly growing restless. Living in the Alabasta desert entails unanimously rough conditions, but if unfortunate enough to reside in some of its worst slums, you'd be more likely to find death before even an ounce of water. Once thriving villages in Alabasta such as Yuba have since been left completely barren, neglected by officials ever since a prevailing drought hit the area, encouraging residents to instead move into its less sterile surrounding cities. Though fallen on rough times, the overall reputation for the King of Alabasta, Nefertari Cobra, has not yet become sour in the eyes of his people. He's generally seen as being a fair man, one who deeply cares for his kingdom. Another respected political figure by the Alabastan people through his affiliation with the Seven Warlord system is Sir Crocodile, who had defeated a fleet of pirates trying to raid the city of Nanohana. In the grand scheme of One Piece, Crocodile is no question one of the weakest of the original Seven Warlords, but one thing I don't think he gets enough credit for is his intelligence, being the perfect encompasser of the heartless, two-faced, charismatic politicians we've all become too familiar with. By the Alabastian people, Crocodile is seen as a beloved, honored figure, someone who stands for the betterment of their kingdom, when in reality, he's the sovereign of the crooked gang Baroque Works, who for years have been terrorizing Alabasta with dance powder, causing the dry spell they've long been experiencing. Crocodile as a leader is not at all driven by pleasures such as fame or wealth. No, instead Crocodile is a man solely obliged with power, willing to destroy anything and betray anyone to achieve more, making him an extremely scary person to be honored in Alabastian society. Having absolutely no moral compass and only being concerned with power, he constantly uses deception to invoke two extremely powerful emotions in the kingdom's inhabitants: respect and anger. He presents himself on the surface as being a powerful figurehead for justice, someone who has great concern for the people of Alabasta, even though in reality he couldn't care less. If he isn't first respected by the people, he has no shot of ever ruling them. We've seen this trope play out countless times throughout history, where a charming leader arises prestige and respect among their people in order to gain power, only to reveal their true character afterwards. He also uses deception to invoke anger, the most powerful emotion a leader could hope to conjure out of their people in order to make them do as they please. He does this by turning the already fed up middle class into soldiers against the nation's aristocracy. Koza, a true Alabastian patriot, represents the outrage brewing in the belly of the nation. Being the leader of the rebel army, Koza, while deeply loyal to his country and the king, is increasingly growing tired of the worsening and worsening conditions of his once prosperous surroundings. Already on the tipping point, confronting who Koza thought to be the king in the capital Alberta on the decline of the kingdom, Bon Clay in disguise confessed to causing the drought that's left Alabasta in shambles, all to maintain the king's riches. Hearing this, especially coming from a king Koza trusted had the people in mind, he was completely enraged, and thus launches Alabasta into a civil war, all of which was part of Sir Crocodile's plan. Crocodile uses the young, fed-up Alabastian men as pawns to start the initial conflict. He wants the people to turn on the government on their own fruition, so when he swoops in and defeats the king along with the people taking his spot as ruler, the people still respect him the same as they did before, if not more, which would give him enormous power over the Alabastian Empire. We've seen this exact scenario play out numerous times on the battlefield battlefield, get the young working class men of a nation angry enough to go to war so the wealthy and powerful don't have to, all while making those of whom died and are injured on the battlefield truly feel although they were fighting for justice. It's a very sick tactic, using people's anger and death so that you can be the one to collect all the fortune and the power. This is a top-notch military strategy employed by Crocodile and executed near flawlessly if it wasn't for some meddling pirates. But even for how corrupt Crocodile was shown to be in Alabasta, this is nothing in comparison to how backwards the world government can be both above and below the Grand Line. The world government at the highest level is run by Emu, whose orders are then carried out by the Five Elders, the highest public authority in the world, rendering the entire political institution a pure authoritarian oligarchic regimen. The world government as the highest political entity has shown to be at best shady and at worst downright evil. From outright burning and rewriting history during the Void Century to the utter insanity of letting the world nobles pretty much do whatever they please, to diluted assassinations under very questionable circumstances and f***ing slavery, it's pretty safe to say the world government is not unwilling to get a little dirty. But in all fairness, they are what keeps society for the average person in order. Most people in One Piece are not pirates, and without government intervention, top pirate crews would rule the world, which would not be good for anybody. In fact, the only thing worse than being ruled by the world government is not being ruled by the world government, as any nations who fail to pay their heavenly offerings, which is just tax with a cooler name, are not protected by the Marines and pretty much open to any and all outside attacks, leaving them virtually doomed for desolation, as most pirate crews do not play fair. With the only exception to this being Wano, only because it's an emperor's territory under Kaido's rule. To keep pirates in the greater society in check, Marine soldiers and fleet admirals are employed to go after any target the world government deems as threats, as well as CP agents acting as a sort of secret police for the world government. On their own, the world government is not more powerful than the four emperors of the sea, which is why at least prior to its dissolution, the 7 warlord system was in play, to keep the world in balance. Yeah, global officials working hand in hand with pirates does seem questionable, but it actually makes a lot of sense once you break it down. The whole reason for the system in the first place is to prevent war by dealing with only a few already powerful criminals and letting them run the seas freely in certain territories. It'll eliminate overall crime, with less organized pirate groups having a much harder time ever getting started or competing with an already established warlord. It's much more manageable to have a single organized crew run a certain area, especially considering that they're already powerful to begin with and can be great allies for the government to have, or at the very least not have against them. Again, overall the system's purpose is to prevent war. It's impossible to completely eliminate piracy, but with this in jurisdiction, the world was at least a lot less chaotic, which now since its abolition, everyone can clearly say, which was heavily pushed and eventually passed by the Fleet Admiral Fujitora after much examination into the incidents I just covered in Alabasta. He believed with the 7 warlord system in place, it only led to more violence, having an already powerful pirate now operating under government immunity. With the wrong warlord, it can spell disaster. Such were the cases in Alabasta and Dressrosa. Whether you side more with Sengoku or Fujitora on this issue is really up for you to decide. I genuinely really like to hear y'all's opinion in the comments, as I for one am for the 7 warlord system, but I'm open to hearing other opinions about the system being in place. But one thing I want to circle back to that I kind of glossed over earlier was the importance of Emu. Emu, a character just introduced a mere 200-ish chapters ago, really completely changed the One Piece world as we thought we knew it. Emu is the supreme ruler of the world. What they say goes no matter what. Even the likes of the 5 Elder Stars must bow down unquestionably to Emu's orders, making the entirety of the One Piece government 20 of the most prominent kingdoms, all under absolute dictatorship. We haven't seen enough of Emu to quite understand his inner thoughts as a leader, but from what we have seen, they undoubtedly rule with an iron fist. They were the one who ultimately ordered for the wipe of the Lulusia kingdom, killing any and all of its citizens, even with a sense of exuberance, as well as outright murdering Cobra because of his ancestral background and colluding with Ohara scholars colors, but mostly because he bears the will of D. Emu has an intense hatred towards anybody with the D middle initial, which is still one of One Piece's mysteries that's yet to be fully unveiled, but we do know ancestors of this lineage are top enemies to Emu and the world government, which makes Monkey D. Luffy the perfect political protagonist for this series, as everything about his character broadcasts an undying sense for freedom. Luffy's end goal is to become the king of the pirates. Why? Because in the world of One Piece, being the pirate king means ultimate freedom over anyone. No other pirate crew or any government official has any power over you. And sure, Luffy would never outright say that's why he wants to be pirate king, as part of his character is doing what he wants only because he wants to, without any foresight, but it's a sentiment he'd surely attest to. Luffy as a character represents adventure, fun, laughter, hence why he's called the Joy Boy. He is the embodiment of jubilation. Throughout all of One Piece, we ride along while Luffy faces up against the darkest trials and toughest opponents, all with a smile across his eager face, showing that if you are able to take on life's greatest obstacles and still be laughing, you in a way have already found yourself free. Sense of peace nobody can ever take away from you. Luffy doesn't win a fight when he beats his opponent. He wins once the party with his crew and anyone he met along the way commences and everyone can finally smile. That's the real victory for Luffy. Something which is more valuable than the One Piece could ever be. Luffy being surrounded by great friends as the captain on his own ship has been liberating enough, which is in direct contrast to Luffy's paradoxical rival, Blackbeard, who, while written as being surfacely the complete contrasting character for Luffy, is actually a lot more similar to him than initially meets the eye. First meeting Blackbeard at a local pirate pub in Jaya, Marshall D. Teach is from his very first sentence in the manga, written as the complete juxtaposition to Luffy's entire being. While both eating a cherry pie, Blackbeard screams out, "This cherry pie is so good, I could die," as at the exact same time, Luffy screams out, "This cherry pie is so bad, I could die." Noticing each other's presence and a bit confused, both reach for a sip from their glass, with Luffy exclaiming, "That drink was really good," and Blackbeard simultaneously exclaiming, "That drink was really bad." From their very first encounter, they can't agree on anything. Luffy then asks the bartender for 50 packs of meat to go, so of course, Teach then asks for 51 apple pies to go, so then Luffy asks for 52, then Teach 53, then Luffy 54, and you get the picture. Both keep trying to one-up the other until they both simultaneously cry out, "Hey, do you want to fight?" no more than a minute into just meeting each other. So we can tell pretty clearly from his debut, Blackbeard is meant to be Luffy's opposite, but in the same way it's easier comparing apples to apples than apples to oranges, these two now Emperors of the Sea are actually a lot more similar than one might think. Both Luffy and Teach are in a way blindly ambitious in becoming the Pirate King, ignoring the low probability that it'll ever happen and the high probability that they might die. Both are to an extent stupidly zealous in fulfilling their dreams. We see this come out in Blackbeard's closing monologue in Jaya about dreams, disregarding the naysayers claiming a pirate's dream never dies. Tough talk coming from a guy who frankly never sleeps. Both at the heart of their beings are optimistically resilient to any challenges they may face, and both want unquestionable freedom over anything. But where they vary is their moral code, as where Luffy brings joy, Blackbeard brings destruction. Luffy, while never officially affiliated with the Red Hair Pirates, a group characterized of great honor, took early inspiration from them to one day form his own crew under similar virtues. Whereas Blackbeard, being under the Whitebeard Pirates, a group all about brotherly love and compassion, was inspired to murder a crew member and betray the family as a whole, robbing them of their devil fruit in the process. I bring up these two beginnings of these respective pirates to display how, while both were originally brought up by respectable crews, now as leaders of their own crew, one deeply values compassion and the other deeply values themselves. Luffy would never put his crew at risk in order to benefit himself, while Blackbeard and his crew openly don't care for each other and would all throw the other under the bus if it be advantageous to them. Instead, as a group, only being connected by a similar drive of greed. Blackbeard is maybe the best realistic depiction of an actual pirate in One Piece. He simply doesn't have a moral compass and has no empathy towards those he kills, steals, and betrays, which is why Blackbeard is the perfect antithesis for Luffy in the morality realm, and for the reasons I mentioned earlier, the world government is the perfect antithesis for Luffy in the ideological realm. Seeing how Blackbeard is meant to be the rival pirate equivalent to Luffy, as he's trying to achieve the same goals, but through very different, much less ethical means, and where the world government represents everything Luffy opposes ideologically. The strict orderliness of a corrupt world bureaucracy completely clashes with Luffy's virtuous ideals of freedom. This is why these two forces in combination are the tailor-made opposition for Luffy as the main character, and why eventually in the final saga, beating them and becoming the king of the pirates will be so satisfying, as these are the two metaphorical representations of everything Luffy is trying to overcome. Which will certainly not be done alone, as in the same way Blackbeard is the mirror against Luffy, the Revolutionary Army is the mirror against the world government. Politically, the Revolutionary Army represents those in favor of the abolition of One Piece's government, the One Piece equivalent to global anarchists. Originally called the Freedom Fighters, Monkey D. Dragon, the movement's leader, and of course Luffy's father, hated the tyrannical hedonism of the world nobles. He hated their unruly power as the top social rank in the world and wished to change this. They usually attempt to liberate individual islands who want to overthrow a corrupt ruler, with their big-scale final mission being dismantling the world government for all countries as a whole. They recruit new members simply from being against the government. Many people are soberly just down for the cause and volunteer themselves to fight for their beliefs. It also helps that they are not selective on who can join the movement. Anyone, as long as they idealistically align with them, are allowed to join, which is why many former slaves or just in general lower class citizens are drawn to banding with them. Due to their sizable numbers and heavy artillery, they are top enemy of the world government, with Dragon being the most wanted person in the whole entire world, which was initially sparked after his involvement with the Cerber Kingdom catastrophe. Cerber Kingdom was by all definitions a segregated island, with the prejudiced ruler Bekri only aiding and abetting those of whom from the northern half, and diminishing finances and attention to anyone who resides in the southern district. Due to the ruler's negligence, many villages in the kingdom's south side were severely susceptible to outside attacks and enslavement. Such was the case in Elderly Village, which is where a core founding member of the Revolutionary Army, Bartholomew Kuma, was originally born. Having been born of peasant blood and a former slave, hailing from the south side of Cerber, Kuma detested the monarch's treatment of his people, and after a brief stint incarcerated, had been saved by the freedom fighters, who were also against Bekri's wrongful ruling. Coming in rescue of the Cerber Kingdom people, the freedom fighters seized Bekri of his power as king and freed Kuma, then uniting with him to officially form the Revolutionary Army. After the enlistment of Bartholomew Kuma, the Revolutionary Army would continue to rebel against corrupt islands and rulers, much to the dismay of the world government. So much so that eventually, after being captured by authorities, two of the most prominent rebel members, Emporio Ivankov and Inazuma, were both sent to Impel Down, the One Piece equivalent to a top-level maximum security prison. Impel Down is a government-monitored facility to holster some of the world's strongest pirates, most dangerous criminals, and the biggest enemies to authorities. Located deep at the bottom of the ocean, embedded by thick layers of concrete and steel within the calm belt, the home to Sea Kings, enormous carnivorous fish creatures, escaping Impel Down is near impossible, and if done, Sea Kings would be sure to gobble you up in seconds. When prisoners first arrive in Impel Down, they are immediately soaked in boiling hot water, known as Hell's Hot Tub, to disinfect and sterilize them. This is ritualistically referred to as baptizing them. Then, depending on the criminal severity, they are sent to one of the various levels that comprise Impel Down, worsening in treatment and conditions the deeper you spiral down, with low-level crooks making up the top levels and the worst public enemies comprising the bottom. The very bottom level, plainly titled Eternal Hell, is reserved for top criminals who the government is, in a way, trying to erase from history, as anyone to step foot in this level is either going to be serving life there or put to death. Even high-ranking officials of the Impel Down prison tend to avoid this level, as anyone housed there are deemed high threats to anybody, even while they're locked up away alone. Notable prisoners who once were or are currently held at this level include Ace, Crocodile, Sheru, Doflamingo, and Jinbei, although notably, Jinbei was never meant to be kept there forever or ever executed, only being kept there temporarily after refusing to side with the world government in the fight against the Whitebeard pirates, which just goes to show the government's spineless mending to even their own rules. They don't care about following even their own legislation, so long as doing so benefits their priorities and their narrative, which is best showcased in one of the biggest inconveniences inconsistencies from the world government being the use of slavery. Despite being officially publicly outlawed, people of high social status like the Celestial Dragons are still allowed to own and monetize slaves in the underworld, with the government generally turning a blind eye to any slave traders, so long as shady officials receive their monetary compensation. And even the government themselves breed slaves in order to make genetically superior marine soldiers and agents, to further expand their military prowess. Candidates, especially from Elbath, the home of the giants, are often taken from their homes and used as pawns for slave traders, frequently being auctioned off at secret underground slave trades. Once bought and owned, slaves are almost unanimously treated horribly, most of the time being worked till near death, such as those unfortunate enough to have had worked on Tequila Wolf. Tequila Wolf, located in the East Blue, is a massive bridge built entirely on the backs of generations of slaves, having had began construction over 700 years ago. The world nobles had demanded the need for a bridge to easier connect various islands together, so in order to do this seemingly menial task, various criminals and slaves were brought to Tequila Wolf to begin construction. The fact that one can very easily travel on boat between islands has led many to believe that the real reason for this bridge's creation was just out of pure evil by the world nobles, wanting to put slaves into hard labor simply because they can. Notably, Tequila Wolf is also the place our good friend Nico Robin was transported to by Kuma at the time skip, where she would be put to work until the insurrection by the Revolutionary Army. Really a pretty fun time skip arc that sadly seems to be largely forgotten among fans, which really sucks because it's easily one of the best political displays of the world elite's fascism and unequivocal power. A system of power very finely sculpted by the 20 kingdoms that make up the world's legislators. In One Piece, the most important kingdoms all reside under a single umbrella beneath the world government, each giving forth their own set of compromises so to remain allied with one another and the world at large may remain civil. This global worldly confederacy was conceived 800 years prior to the present story, depicting Mary Joie as the empty throne. 20 nobles of the most powerful nations each placed a weapon at the stake of an empty throne as a symbol of allegiance to one another. No one nation sits alone on the throne, it's instead protected by defenses of all 20 nations in coalition. No kingdom is to be prioritized over the other. Although we do now know Emu is the true Atlas of the throne, this is symbolic to show that no nation outright controls the world on their own. Each nation is equal under their guise of power, and each nation is to hail to the supreme ruler Emu. But one extraordinarily powerful country does not bow down its head as sheeps to the world government. One nation comprised of some of the strongest warriors throughout the world. This is the nation of Wano, easily the most politically unique staple of ground in the One Piece world. Wano never needed government or other countries' assistance solely on the back of its greatest warrior samurais, swordsmen so gifted that even the likes of the naval marines wouldn't dare to test them. Samurais are cherished in Wano society with high social status, and ever since Orochi's rule, being the only social class permitted to openly carry katanas. In fact, Wano's entire culture as an island is vastly different to anything else we've seen in One Piece. Wano is, of course, a closed island, and it wants to remain that way, so any communication with outside vendors is strictly forbidden, along with attempting to ever leave Wano being a crime as well. Notably, Kazuki Oden had heavily disagreed with this notion, and wanted Wano to open its borders to the outside world, which was a belief that would in turn, along with other factors, cost Oden his life. This was of course ordered by Kurozumi Urachi, possibly the worst person to ever hold power in Wano society, with only Kaido being tied for second. To properly exhibit just how bad Orochi has been for Wano society, we must first establish the country's historical tradition of its monarchy. For hundreds and hundreds of years, Wano at a grand scale had exclusively been ruled by a shogun of Kazuki family blood, with 5 other prominent families acting as regional leaders to different singular districts. This hierarchical system would remain in place until, in attempts to gain greater power, an ancestor of the Kurozumi family had poisoned the Kazoki family in order to attempt to fill their place as the shogun. Being unsuccessful in this, the Kurozumi bloodline was properly expelled from the Wano country monarchy altogether, and any political power the last name once carried was aptly given to the Shimatsuki family, one of the other noble bloodlines in Wano, who then began controlling 2 separate districts. That is, is, until eventually down the line, due to plays of deception, help from the Beast Pirates, and the death of Odin, Orochi, who had been of Kurizumi lineage, was able to succeed Kurizuki Sukiyaki in becoming the Shogun of Wano. Being completely aware of Orochi's evil, the other noble families of Wano refused to rule under him and his backward practices, and attempted to rebel against him as being ruler, only leading to Orochi, with the help of Kaido, forcibly removing any of these families of their power by ways of murder, replacing their positions with the likes of King, Queen, and of course, Kaido himself. With only a few devious activities, Orochi was pretty much able to rule Wano completely to his own accord. Now, not being bogged down by any of the other noble families, Orochi was free to do whatever he wanted with Wano, and it didn't take long until Wano country was turned into a bona fide wasteland. Orochi was an irrationally cruel ruler who only cared for those of whom inhibited the flower capital, disregarding the rest of Wano, leaving it to turn into desolate badlands, using propaganda to paint himself as being some sort of savior for Wano society, who saved them from the tyrannical rule of the Kazuki tribe. Those of poor backgrounds would often go hungry, barely being able to feed themselves on their sorry salaries, even after working long hours inside factories to mass-produce weapons for the Beast Pirates. And anyone who failed to do so, or anyone who spoke any negative diction on the Kurizumi name, were more likely than not put to death, or even worse, sent to Udon. Udon is more or less a concentration camp, ran under Queen's regulations that makes residents work daily until exhaustion or even till death. This part of Wano is particularly depressing as, at one point in time, this space surfaced a thick, beautiful forest filled with sakura trees, but now has been reduced to dry soil and emotionless buildings. Orochi was truly an awful ruler to his people, similar to how Eniru treated certain classes of his people in Skypia, although in that case, it isn't so black and white. Much the same as Wano, Skypia has an extremely rich culture and deep history that, at some point or another, had been stained with immorality. In particular, the historical treatment of Skypia's Shandorian tribe has gravely portrayed real-life versions of colonialism and religious oppression. The Shandorians, the indigenous people of Skypia, have been robbed of their natural land by the more powerful god of thunder, Eniru. Eniru, being a self-indulgent narcissist with a god complex, truly feels as though colonizing the lesser Shandorian people is being virtuous towards them, as anyone privileged enough to be under the god Eniru's rule is better off because of it, even despite his many shortcomings as a leader. He believes forcing the Skypia people under his dogma is just his godly duties, disavowing their traditional way of life in favor of forcing his own. This is, of course, a mirror to how colonizers of places such as Africa and America justified their actions under God, by claiming that they were in fact helping the native people to become civilized and followers of Christ, not terrorizing them in their individual way of life, instead refining them to better fit their own ideals. This mentality has left the Shandorian tribe into having been fighting for literal centuries in a holy battle to reclaim Upper Yard, a large significant portion of the Skypian estate. The Skypians, the original ones to steal the Shandorians' land, had been in a 400-year-long war with them that they would eventually win, keeping Upper Yard as their own personal territory. The Skypians as a race, while still colonizers, are at least a lot less vulgar and absolute than the likes of Enel, a force on Skypian society where nobody benefits and nobody's happy. After destroying his homeland Aberka, Enel would take up Skypia as his new providence, pretty much colonizing the colonizers, taking Upper Deck from both races of people and reserving it for himself, forbidding anyone else of ever stepping foot there. This was, of course, in great disinterest to both the Skypian and the Shandorian people, but due to Enel's excessive strength and the help of God's army, for subordinates to Enel who fiercely serve under him, they didn't really have much of a choice. Wiper, the leader of the Shandorians, despite his best efforts, was simply just not strong enough to take Enel head on, so in spite of his wicked hatred towards what he represented, was forced to yield to his authority. In the same way less advanced civilizations were preyed upon by the stronger throughout history, the Shandorians as a people were shelled out of their rightfully owned lands by the likes of an aloof deity. That is, until, like many problems in One Piece, a magical rubber man and his band of zany characters swooped in and saved the day, returning the land to its rightful owners. But all in all, One Piece as a series has time and time again proved itself to be more than just a pirate adventure. It puts a mirror to our real world and shines light on pressing issues prevalent throughout time. Through the good, the bad, and the ugly, Oda has no doubt written written a timeless story that I've been honored to have read. One Piece is frankly a once-in-a-lifetime kind of adventure, and I hope this video helped to illuminate that. But that's about gonna wrap up the video, guys. If you did enjoy, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Being a smaller creator myself, that really does help out a ton. I know I haven't made an anime video in quite some time, but I thought this would be a treat since I've now been making content for about a whole year now, which is crazy. I can't thank you guys enough. Seriously, this would not be possible without you guys. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you did enjoy this video, I got plenty more you could go check out. Plenty of other One Piece videos even in particular, but yeah, other than that, have a good one, alright?